The vast, unyielding expanse of the Arizona Territory stretched taut under a sky the color of bleached bone, the sun a relentless hammer beating down upon the parched earth. It was a land that offered little solace, a place where survival was a daily sacrament. Yet within its harsh embrace lay pockets of tenacious life, oases carved out by sheer will and unyielding spirit. Elias Thorne's ranch, the Double Bar T, was one such haven, its well-tended acres a testament to a quiet strength, a green promise against the ochre desolation. Elias himself, a man sculpted by solitude and a sorrow that had long ago settled into the lines around his eyes, rode his southern fence line, the creak of saddle leather a familiar rhythm against the vast silence. His heart, though weathered, was not barren. It remembered loss, the ghost of a wife's laughter and a child's bright future snatched away by fever years past, memories that fueled a deep, unvoiced compassion. It was this compassion that sharpened his gaze when he saw it, not a stray steer, nor a break in the wire, but a shape, small and pitifully slumped against a fence post, that made his blood run cold as a winter wind. He spurred his horse, Dust Devil, closer, his hand instinctively resting on the worn stock of the rifle in its scabbard, though the sight that met him was not one of threat, but of an atrocity that stole the breath from his lungs. A girl, no more than 16 summers if that, was tied to the fence, her wrists raw and bleeding against the cruel bite of coarse rope. Her calico dress was torn and filthy, her hair a matted tangle, and her face, pale beneath a layer of dust and grime, was turned upwards to the merciless sky, her lips cracked and parched. She was a fragile thing, seemingly abandoned to the scorching sun, a sacrifice to an unknown cruelty. "Great heavens!" Elias whispered, the words a raw prayer in the oppressive heat. This was not the work of nature's indifference. This was the deliberate, cold hand of man. In that moment, something shifted within him, a righteous anger coalescing with a profound, aching pity. This girl, this child, would not perish here, not if he had breath left in his body. His loneliness, the quiet ache of his existence, suddenly had a focal point, a purpose ignited in the face of such blatant injustice. He dismounted, his movements swift but gentle, his shadow falling over her still form. Elias knelt, his weathered fingers working with surprising delicacy at the knotted ropes that bound the girl to the rough-hewn post. The hemp had cut deeply into her tender skin, leaving angry, weeping welts. "Easy now, child," he murmured, his voice low and soothing, a tone he hadn't used in years, not since his own dear Mary. "I'm here to help." Her eyes fluttered open, dark pools of terror and confusion in a face gaunt with suffering. A small, animalistic whimper escaped her lips as she flinched, trying to pull away, but the ropes held her fast, and she was too weak to offer any real resistance. He saw the raw fear in her gaze, the ingrained expectation of pain, and it twisted something deep inside him. "No one's going to hurt you anymore," he said, his voice firm with a conviction that brooked no argument. He finally freed her wrists, then her ankles, which were similarly, though less tightly, bound. She slumped forward, and he caught her, her body shockingly light, like a bird with broken wings. From his saddlebag, he retrieved his canteen, unscrewing the cap with steady hands. "Water," he urged gently, holding it to her cracked lips. She drank, at first hesitantly, then with a desperate, gulping thirst that spoke of long, agonizing hours without. He let her take only a little at a time, knowing too much too soon could harm her further. When she had taken what she could, he carefully lifted her into his arms. She was little more than skin and bone, yet he carried her as if she were the most precious cargo, settling her gently in front of him on the saddle. Dust Devil, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, stood patient and still. Back at the ranch house, a sturdy, welcoming structure of timber and stone, Martha, his housekeeper and confidant of 2 decades, was sweeping the porch. A woman of ample warmth and quiet wisdom, her face, usually wreathed in a gentle smile, registered shock, then a profound, maternal concern as Elias carefully dismounted, the unconscious girl cradled in his arms. "Elias? What in God's name?" He didn't need to explain the horror. It was etched on the girl's suffering form. She was tied to the south fence, Martha. Left for dead, Martha's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with dismay. The poor lamb. Bring her in, quickly together. They carried her into the cool dimness of the house, to a spare room that had remained untouched for years, a room that had once held dreams of childish laughter. Martha, with practiced efficiency and a tenderness that soothed even Elias's frayed nerves, began to care for the girl. She bathed the grime away, treated her wounds with gentle hands and healing salves, her murmurs soft and comforting. Elias stood by, a silent sentinel, his heart a heavy stone in his chest. That first night, Alara, for he would later learn her name, lay in a clean bed, tucked beneath a soft quilt, but her sleep was tormented. She cried out, small, broken sounds, thrashing against unseen demons. Elias sat in a chair by her door, listening, his presence a silent vow of protection, while Martha hovered, offering sips of broth when the girl briefly surfaced from her nightmares. The ranch, usually a place of quiet masculine endeavor, now held a fragile, feminine presence, and its sturdy walls seemed to lean in, offering sanctuary. Days bled into weeks. Alara's physical wounds began to heal under Martha's diligent care, the angry red of her scars fading to a paler pink. Her body slowly accepted nourishment, the hollows in her cheeks gradually softening. Yet, the wounds within, those carved into her spirit, were far deeper and slower to mend. She remained largely silent, her dark eyes watchful, following Elias and Martha with an unnerving intensity, as if constantly assessing a threat that never materialized. She flinched at sudden movements, her breath catching at the sound of a raised voice, even if it was merely one of the ranch hands calling out in the distance. Elias understood. He had seen fear in wild creatures, but this was different, a fear born of calculated cruelty, of trust betrayed at its most fundamental level. He instructed his few hands to keep their distance, to soften their voices when near the house. He himself moved with a quiet deliberation when around her, his voice always gentle. He made no demands, asked no prying questions. He simply existed in her periphery, a steady, calm presence. He would leave a freshly picked wildflower from the small patch Martha tended by her bedside, or a particularly glossy apple from the cellar. Martha, with her innate maternal warmth, mended the girl's tattered dress, then sewed her a new one from soft blue cotton, simple but clean. She would hum old lullabies while kneading bread, the comforting sounds filling the kitchen where Alara often sat, a silent shadow in the corner. Slowly, tentatively, Alara began to uncurl from her protective shell. She started to observe the rhythm of the ranch, the quiet kindness that permeated the air. She saw Elias treat his animals with a firm but gentle hand, heard the respect in his voice when he spoke to Martha. This world, so different from the one she had known, was a confusing tapestry of safety and unfamiliar peace. One evening, as the sun bled crimson and gold across the western plains, Elias found her on the porch, staring out at the vast landscape. He sat not beside her, but a respectful distance away, on the porch steps. For a long while neither spoke. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, raspy from disuse, she said, "Why?" He turned, his gaze questioning. "Why did you help me?" Elias considered his answer, his gaze drifting to the distant purple mountains. "Because it was the right thing to do, child," he said simply. "No one deserves to be treated like that." She absorbed his words, her small brow furrowed. Another long silence. Then, "My name is Alara," a small offering, a fragile seed of trust planted in the fertile ground of his compassion. He nodded, a gentle smile touching his lips. Alara. It's a good name. He didn't press for more. He knew, with the patience of a man accustomed to the slow turn of seasons, that healing, like the stubborn desert bloom, took its own time. The name, Alara, seemed to unlock something within her. It was as if acknowledging her identity, speaking it aloud in this safe space, gave her a sliver of agency she hadn't possessed before. She began to speak more, her voice still quiet, but with fewer tremors. Small questions at first. Is that your horse? Dust devil? Or, does the creek always run so clear? Elias answered each one with patient gravity, seeing in them not just curiosity, but a reaching out, a testing of the waters of this new kinder world. Martha, ever practical, gently drew Alara into the rhythms of the household. No demands were made, but Alara started to follow her, watching her knead dough, churn butter, mend linens. Soon, she was offering to help, her small hands surprisingly deft as she shelled peas or folded laundry. There was a solace in the simple, repetitive tasks, a grounding that her fractured spirit desperately needed. Elias, sensing her growing comfort within the house, began to carefully introduce her to the gentler aspects of ranch life. He took her to the small pasture where the new foals gambled, their long legs endearingly clumsy. He showed her the vegetable garden Martha meticulously tended, explaining how each plant grew, how the earth, if treated with respect, would yield its bounty. He never forced her interaction, simply made the opportunities available. One afternoon, he found her by the corral, watching him work with a young filly, his voice a low murmur as he calmed the spirited animal. He didn't speak to her directly, but continued his work, aware of her silent presence. Later, as the sky turned a soft lavender, he was checking on a new calf when he saw Alara sitting on a low stone wall, a sketchpad he'd left on the porch table resting in her lap, a piece of charcoal clutched in her fingers. She was drawing, her brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't approach, didn't want to startle her, but a quiet warmth spread through his chest. She was finding ways to express herself, to reclaim small pieces of her stolen girlhood. Slowly, in fragments, like piecing together a shattered vase, Alara began to share whispers of her past. It was always in quiet moments, usually with Elias, when the vastness of the land seemed to absorb the pain of her words. She spoke of a father, Silas Vance, an itinerant man with a spirit as barren as the harshest desert, a man whose hands were quick to strike and whose heart held no love for her. She was a possession, a burden, a thing to be bartered or broken. She spoke of constant movement, of hunger, of a fear that had been her most constant companion. The reason she was tied to the fence? It was a punishment, she said, her voice trembling, for spilling a meager pot of beans, or perhaps for not fetching a high enough price for some stolen trinket he'd had her sell in a dusty, forgotten town. Or maybe, she whispered, her eyes dark with a remembered terror, he was just trying to break her spirit for good, to make her utterly compliant before selling her off to some cruel fate he'd hinted at. Elias listened, his face a granite mask that concealed a roiling fury within. Each word she uttered was a lash against his own soul. He said little, but his silence was a heavy, protective blanket. When she faltered, he would simply say, "You're safe here, Alara. He can't hurt you anymore," and in the quiet set of his jaw, in the unwavering steadiness of his gaze, she began, truly, to believe him. He was not just a rescuer. He was a bulwark against the storm of her past. A hesitant smile, then another, rarer still, a quiet laugh that sounded like wind chimes in the still air. These were the signs of Alara's thawing spirit. The terror in her eyes began to recede, replaced by a cautious curiosity, and sometimes a glimmer of the resilient, proud girl she was meant to be. She started to anticipate the rhythms of the ranch, to feel a sense of belonging, a concept so foreign it was like learning a new language. She saw Elias not just as a protector, but as something akin to the father she never had, patient, strong, and unfailingly kind. Martha, with her warm hugs and endless supply of cookies, became the mother figure whose absence had left a gaping void in Alara's young life. One evening, after a simple supper, Elias broached the subject of her future. "Alara," he began, his voice gentle, "have you ever thought about schooling? Learning to read and write properly, perhaps?" Her eyes widened. "School?" she repeated, the word foreign on her tongue. "No one ever. I never thought." He nodded. "There's a good woman in the small settlement down near Willow Creek, Mrs. Peterson. She teaches a few of the children from the outlying ranches. If it's something you'd like, we could arrange it, he stressed. It would be your choice. Entirely, the idea took root, a seed of possibility in the slowly healing soil of her mind. To learn, to understand the words in the few books Martha kept, to write her own name with confidence. It was a heady prospect. The very notion that she had a choice, that her desires mattered, was a revelation. A few weeks later, Elias decided a trip to the settlement was in order, for supplies and to gently introduce Alara to a world beyond the immediate trauma of her past and the sanctuary of the ranch. He was careful, watchful. The settlement was small, just a handful of buildings, a general store, a smithy, a small church that doubled as the schoolhouse. For Alara, it was overwhelming. The sight of strangers, the noise, the bustle, all brought a flicker of her old fear. But Elias was a steady presence by her side, his quiet confidence a shield. While in the general store, a grizzled trapper, reeking of stale whiskey and unwashed hides, eyed Alara with a leering curiosity that made Elias's blood simmer. He casually stepped between them, his gaze on the trapper cold and hard, until the man shuffled away, muttering. It was a small incident, but it served as a stark reminder. The world held dangers, and Silas Vance was still out there, a shadow that could potentially fall across their newfound peace. Elias had made discreet inquiries through a trusted friend in a larger town further west, a retired lawman. The description of Silas Vance, tall, gaunt, with a cruel set to his mouth and a distinctive scar above his left eye, had yielded nothing concrete. But the friend had promised to keep an ear to the ground. For now, there was only an uneasy quiet, a sense of waiting for a storm that might, or might not, break. Alara, though, was growing stronger, more rooted. The brief, unsettling encounter in the store had scared her. But back at the ranch, surrounded by the familiar comfort and Elias's reassuring presence, the fear subsided more quickly than it once would have. She was learning to trust not just them, but her own resilience. The fragile peace of their carefully constructed world was shattered on a blistering August afternoon. The air was thick and still, the sky a hazy, ominous brass. Elias was in the barn, mending a broken harness, the scent of leather and hay familiar and comforting. Alara was in the kitchen with Martha, humming softly as she helped roll out pie crust, a light dusting of flour on her nose making her look even younger. Suddenly, the ranch's usually placid dogs erupted in a furious cacophony of barking from the direction of the main track leading to the house. Elias straightened, his senses instantly on high alert. This wasn't the bark for a stray coyote or a passing rider. This was a warning, sharp and urgent. He strode to the barn door, wiping his hands on his denims. His eyes narrowed against the glare. Two figures on horseback were approaching, still distant, but their silhouettes were unfamiliar, unsettling. One was tall and wiry, the other bulkier. As they drew closer, a knot of ice formed in Elias's stomach. The taller man, gaunt and hunched slightly in the saddle, had a hawk-like face, and even from this distance, Elias thought he could discern a pale line above one eye. His heart hammered against his ribs. He knew with a chilling certainty who it was: Silas Vance. He turned back into the relative dimness of the barn for a moment, his mind racing. He needed to get Alara out of sight, to face this himself. "Martha!" he called, his voice tight. Martha appeared at the kitchen door, her expression questioning, Alara a pale shadow behind her. "Take Alara to the root cellar," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Lock it from the inside. Don't come out, no matter what you hear, until I tell you it's safe." Fear, stark and immediate, leaped into Alara's eyes. "What is it, Elias? Who is it?" she whispered, her voice trembling. It might be trouble, child. Just do as I say." Quickly now Martha, her face grim but resolute, took Alara's hand. "Come." Dear Alara looked back at Elias, her eyes wide with a dawning, terrible understanding. "Is it him?" Elias met her gaze, his own filled with a fierce protectiveness. "I'll handle it, Alara. Trust me." He watched them hurry towards the cellar entrance at the back of the house before turning back to face the approaching storm. He walked calmly towards the front porch, his rifle now held loosely but ready in his hands. By the time Silas Vance and his companion, a brutish-looking man with a dull, vacant stare, reined in their tired horses a few yards from the porch, Elias was waiting, a figure of implacable stillness. Silas Vance's eyes, cold and assessing as a snake's, swept over the prosperous ranch, a flicker of avarice in their depths before they settled on Elias. A cruel smirk twisted his thin lips. "Well now, this is a right pleasant surprise," Vance drawled, his voice like gravel. "I'm looking for my daughter. Girl named Elara. Run off she did. Ungrateful whelp. Heard tell she might have ended up in these parts." He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust. "You seen her, mister?" Elias's grip tightened on his rifle. "There's no one here by that name who belongs to you," he stated, his voice level, cold as iron. Vance's smirk widened, turning into a sneer. "Oh, I think there is. She's my property. And I've come to claim what's mine." Silas Vance's eyes, hard and glinting with malice, raked over Elias. "Property," he repeated, savoring the word. "The law says she's mine, mister. I'm her pa, his companion." A hulking man with small, piggish eyes shifted in his saddle, his hand resting near a large pistol tucked into his belt. Elias stood his ground, unmoving, his gaze unwavering. "The law also says a man protects those under his roof from harm. And you, Vance, are harm personified." His voice was quiet, yet it carried the weight of absolute conviction. "She's not here for you to take." Vance's face darkened, the veneer of civility cracking. "Are you calling me a liar, sodbuster? I know she's here. I got ways of findin' things out." He swung his leg over his horse, dropping heavily to the ground, his companion following suit. "Now, we can do this easy or we can do this hard. Makes no difference to me. I'm leaving with my girl." He took a step towards the porch. "Elara!" he bellowed, his voice a harsh, grating sound that clawed at the air. "Get out here, you ungrateful brat. Your pa's come for ya." Inside the root cellar, Elara flinched as if struck, pressing her hands over her ears. Martha held her close, whispering words of reassurance, though her own heart pounded with fear. Elias took a step forward, placing himself squarely between Vance and the house. "You'll not terrorize her, Vance. You'll not lay a hand on her." His rifle, though still pointed towards the ground, was a clear statement. "This is my land, and she is under my protection." Vance laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Protection? You think you can keep her from me? She's blood of my blood. She belongs to me, to do with as I please." He gestured to his companion. "Jed, if he won't be reasonable, maybe we persuade him." Jed grinned, a slow, ugly stretching of his lips, and his hand moved more purposefully towards his gun. Just then, the cellar door, hidden around the side of the house, creaked open. Martha appeared first, her face pale but determined, a heavy iron skillet gripped in her hand. And behind her, her head held high despite the tremor that ran through her slight frame, was Elara. "No," Elara said, her voice surprisingly clear and strong, though it quavered slightly. "I won't go with you." Silas Vance spun around, his eyes widening in surprise, then narrowing into slits of fury at the sight of her. "There you are, you little viper. Get over here now." Elara took a step forward, out from behind Martha, positioning herself slightly behind Elias, but visible. "You're not my father," she declared, her voice gaining strength. "A father doesn't tie his child to a fence and leave her to die. A father doesn't sell his daughter like she's cattle." Vance's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful whelp. After all I've done for ya." He lunged forward, intending to grab her. Elias moved with lightning speed, stepping into Vance's path, the butt of his rifle coming up in a short, sharp jab to Vance's chest. Vance stumbled back, gasping for air, his eyes filled with shocked fury. "You'll pay for that, rancher." Jed, seeing his opportunity, reached for his pistol. "Elias, look out!" Martha cried. But Elias was already turning, his movements economical and precise. He didn't raise his rifle to shoot. Instead, he used it as a barrier, deflecting Jed's clumsy draw, then bringing the barrel down in a swift, hard arc against the man's gun hand. Jed howled in pain, his pistol clattering to the dust. Elias kicked it away. "This is over, Vance," Elias said, his voice deadly calm. His rifle now leveled, not quite at Vance, but in a way that left no doubt of his intent. "You will leave my property. You will not come back. You will not seek her out. Alara is no longer yours to command or abuse. She has a home here. She has a choice here. Something you never gave her." Silas Vance glared, his chest heaving, his face a mask of impotent rage and hatred. He looked from Elias's resolute face to Alara's defiant stance, to Martha gripping her skillet like a shield. He saw no fear, only a united front of courage and conviction. He was beaten not just by force, but by a moral authority he could neither comprehend nor overcome. "You haven't heard the last of this," he snarled, but the threat lacked its earlier venom. He grabbed his injured cohort, Jed, who was cradling his throbbing hand. "Come on, you useless lout," without another word. They mounted their horses, their retreat ignominious and swift, kicking up dust as they fled back down the track, the furious barking of the dogs chasing their departure. The dust settled slowly, mirroring the gradual calming of hearts that had been stretched taut with fear and adrenaline. Alara stood trembling, reaction setting in, but her eyes were fixed on the retreating figures of her tormentors until they were mere specks in the vast, indifferent landscape. Then, she swayed, and Elias was there in an instant, his strong arm around her, guiding her to the porch steps. Martha was beside them, her skillet now resting on the railing, her face etched with relief and concern. "It's all right, child," Elias said, his voice softer now, the iron gone from it, replaced by a deep tenderness. "He's gone. He won't hurt you again." Alara looked up at him, her eyes wide and luminous with unshed tears. For a long moment, she just stared, as if seeing him, seeing everything, for the first time in a new light. Then, with a small, choked sob, she buried her face in his sturdy chest, her slender arms wrapping around his waist, clinging to him as if he were the only solid thing in a reeling world. Elias held her, his hand gently stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances. He felt the frailness of her, the years of terror and pain she had endured, and a wave of profound protectiveness, fiercer than any anger, washed over him. This child, once a stranger found broken and abandoned, was now inextricably part of his life, part of his heart. Martha laid a comforting hand on Alara's shoulder. "He spoke true, dearie. This is your home now. Your safe harbor." Alara's sobs slowly subsided, replaced by deep, shuddering breaths. When she finally lifted her head, her face was tear-streaked, but there was a new light in her eyes, a dawning peace, a profound sense of release. The monster from her past had appeared, and he had been vanquished, not by some mythical hero, but by the quiet courage of an ordinary, good man and her own newfound voice. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, looking from Elias to Martha. "Thank you both." Elias simply nodded, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "There's no need for thanks, Alara. We're family now." The word hung in the air, potent and true. Not a family born of blood, but one forged in compassion, courage, and a shared victory over darkness. It was a bond stronger than any legal tie Silas Vance could ever claim. The confrontation, terrifying as it had been, had served as a necessary catharsis, an exorcism of the ghosts that had haunted Alara for so long. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and violet, a profound quiet settled over the double-bar T, a quiet filled not with loneliness or fear, but with the comforting presence of a love that had taken root and blossomed in the most unexpected of circumstances. Life on the double-bar T settled into a new, more secure rhythm, the shadow of Silas Vance receding like a bad dream in the warm light of day. Alara, truly free for the first time in her memory, began to flourish. The haunted look in her eyes was gradually replaced by a sparkle of curiosity and, Increasingly, joy. She embraced the lessons Mrs. Peterson offered with an eager mind, quickly learning to read with fluency, her imagination taking flight with every storybook, every passage of poetry. She filled notebooks with her drawings, capturing the rugged beauty of the ranch, the expressions of the animals, the quiet strength in Elias's face. She moved with a newfound confidence, her laughter, once a rare and precious sound, now echoing more frequently through the welcoming rooms of the ranch house and across the sun-drenched yard. She rode out with Elias sometimes, learning the land, her initial timidity around the horses replaced by a gentle skill. She had a natural empathy for the creatures, a quiet way that calmed even the most skittish colt. Elias watched her transformation with a quiet, profound joy. The aching loneliness that had been his constant companion for so many years had eased, replaced by a sense of purpose that warmed him from the inside out. He was no longer just Elias Thorne, solitary rancher. He was a guardian, a mentor, a father in all the ways that truly mattered. He found himself smiling more, the lines of sorrow around his eyes softening, crinkling now with affection and pride. He saw in Alara not the victim she had been, but the resilient, intelligent, and compassionate young woman she was becoming. They spoke often of her future, not as a directive from him, but as a shared exploration of possibilities. He encouraged her dreams, whatever they might be, assuring her that she had the strength and intelligence to achieve anything she set her mind to. The ranch itself seemed to breathe easier, its fields greener, its skies bluer, reflecting the hope that now resided within its heart. Martha, ever the warm, steady anchor, clucked over Alara like a mother hen, delighting in her progress. Her quiet wisdom a constant source of comfort and support for them both. The threat of Silas Vance, though never entirely forgotten, faded into the realm of a conquered past. Elias had taken further steps, officially reporting Vance's initial cruelty and subsequent threatening return to the territorial marshal in Prescott, providing Alara's clear testimony. While Vance had vanished into the lawless territories, a warrant now existed for him, a small but significant piece of paper that underscored the finality of his defeat in their lives. The true victory, however, was not in legal documents, but in Alara's blossoming spirit, in the secure and loving home they had built together, a testament to the enduring power of kindness to heal even the deepest wounds. Years melted into a tapestry woven with threads of peace, hard work, and quiet joy. 5 years passed, then 10. Alara blossomed from a rescued girl into a radiant young woman of 26, her spirit as bright and untamed as the wildflowers that dotted the ranch meadows in spring. She had absorbed knowledge like the thirsty earth absorbed rain, excelling in her studies with Mrs. Peterson and then, with Elias's proud support, attending a small ladies' academy in Prescott for 2 years, returning with a mind sharpened and a quiet confidence that sat easily upon her. She could have chosen a life in town, perhaps as a teacher herself, for she had a gift for explaining things with clarity and patience. But her heart remained tethered to the double-bar T, to the vast skies and the man who had shown her the meaning of home. She brought her new knowledge back to the ranch, helping Elias with the account books, suggesting new methods for crop rotation in their expanding gardens, her insights keen and practical. The ranch prospered under their combined care, its herds growing, its reputation for quality and fairness spreading throughout the territory. Elias, now graying at the temples but still strong and vital, watched her with a love that filled every corner of his being. The loneliness he had once known was a distant memory, replaced by a deep, abiding contentment. He was no longer just a rancher. He was a father, a grandfather in spirit to the children who would one day fill these rooms, a patriarch of a family chosen by heart. Martha, her steps slower but her smile as warm as ever, presided over the household, a beloved matriarch, her stories of the old days becoming cherished lore. Alara, in time, found love. A young doctor, Thomas Ashton, who had come to the growing settlement near Willow Creek, was drawn to her intelligence, her quiet grace, and the resilient strength that shone from her dark eyes. Elias, after initial, typically paternal scrutiny, saw the goodness in Thomas, the respect he held for Alara, and gave his wholehearted blessing. Their wedding, held under the vast Arizona sky on the ranch grounds, was a simple but profoundly joyful affair, a celebration of love found and futures bright. Children came, their laughter echoing the dreams Elias had once thought lost forever. They grew up knowing the story of their mother's courage and their grandfather Elias's unwavering compassion, a tale that became the bedrock of their family's identity. The legacy of that desperate day at the fence line rippled outwards, far beyond the boundaries of the Double Bar T. It was a quiet testament, spoken in hushed, respectful tones in the nearby communities, of how one act of righteous kindness could not only save a life but transform it, creating a lineage of love, security, and strength where only cruelty and despair had once reigned. Elias Thorne, the lonely rancher, lived to see his world, once marked by sorrow, filled to overflowing with the warmth of a family he had not expected but had embraced with all his heart. His life a testament to the enduring truth that the greatest wealth is not in land or possessions, but in the love given and received, a love that could make even the harshest desert bloom. The sun still beat down on the Arizona territory, but for Alara, and for Elias, and for all who came after, it was a sun that warmed, that nurtured, that illuminated a path forged by courage and illuminated by unwavering love.